Welcome to the Demidchik Law Firm YouTube channel.
大家好，欢迎大家收看安娜说法节目。当宠物狗咬伤他人的时候，作为狗主人到底应该如何应对呢？而且很有可能狗会被认定为危险动物，面临安乐死的风险。今天安娜律所的创始律师 Demidchik 安娜戴密奇将为大家详细的分析这个话题如果宠物狗咬伤他人，如何为狗主人争取更好的结果，同时呢能够保护宠物的未来。首先我想请问安娜律师的是当宠物狗咬伤他人的时候，作为狗主人到底应该如何应对呢？ Hi Anna, it's great to have you with us today. Thank you for taking the time to join us.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
My first question is, when a dog bites someone, how should the owner respond? What consequences might the dog face?
The consequences can range from severe restrictions on the dog to the separation from the owner to potential euthanasia in the worst case scenarios. So usually the first steps in the actions when a dog bites someone and the case goes to the animal control for adjudication. A lot of times, if it's the very first instance, the animal control will take notice and the animal control will place conditions on the owner keeping the dog. For example, that the dog must be in the enclosure, unable to escape that enclosure, or the dog must be on the leash, or the dog must be trained. Let's say if the incident was really severe, the animal control might require that the owner puts a dog through additional training. Sometimes they want to see the dog muzzled, again, depending on the breed of the dog and the size of the dog and the severity of the incident. And so if the owner is able to comply with those restrictions and keep the dog from being aggressive, from being perceived as dangerous by people around, from attacking other animals, in that case, a lot of times this is the resolution of the case. However, if the other people around feel that the dog continues to be dangerous, or if the dog injures someone, which is the worst case scenario, what usually happens is the dog gets confiscated, at least temporarily. And so the dog is separated and the case is being adjudicated. And that can last from maybe a couple of weeks to several months, depending on how hard you have to fight. And then ultimately there's going to be either some kind of resolution of the case, and hopefully it is not the euthanasia, which unfortunately is something that does happen if the case is not handled properly.
好，非常感谢安娜律师的介绍我想请问安娜律师的第二个问题呢，就是在事件处理当中应该从一开始采取哪些措施，才能够避免狗被认定为危险动物，或者说面临安乐死的可能呢？What steps can be taken early to prevent a dog from being classified as dangerous or facing the possibility of being euthanized?
So I think it's a very good question, because I think the steps include not just legal, but also practical ones. And the practical steps, I would say, they center around the prevention of the dog acting dangerously, acting aggressively. Usually the best prevention is making sure the dog is calm and stable and knowing the dog's history. Because, today a lot of people are encouraged to adopt dogs from shelters, adopt dogs from other people, don't buy, adopt. And that's a great thing, but you never know what kind of baggage the dog is coming with, what kind of baggage the dog is bringing with them, and what kind of stress the dog is enduring in all of these transitions. So while it's a very noble endeavor to adopt a dog, one also has to be careful to make sure that the dog is actually safe for people around them. So one step is knowing the dog history, trying to keep the dog calm. Another step that you can take is to be situationally aware at all times, you as the dog owner. Situationally aware means paying attention to your surroundings and preventing situations where the dog could react aggressively. So if you know the dog is somewhat reactive and you see somebody coming by on a bike, maybe take the dog to the other side of the path, for example, right? Don't be on the phone, watch what's going on. Also watch the dog, watch how the dog reacts. If the dog starts to get agitated as another dog is approaching, well, maybe turn around and take a circle, right? And don't take the chances of the dog lashing out. So there is this situational awareness. I also saw several cases in my legal practice where what happened is the owner was doing everything correctly, but the leash or the collar malfunctioned. Occasionally, unfortunately, it happens. And so it's a good idea to inspect the leash and the collar once in a while, especially if it's been like a few years that these things have been used. There is some wear and tear. Inspect it, take a look, make sure it's still working, or even replace it altogether. Also make sure that the leash and the collar are appropriate for the size and the strength of the dog. Because like I said, I've seen cases where the owner had the dog on the leash, thought they had the dog under control, and then as the dog lunged towards another dog, the leash just snapped and a tragedy ensued. Very unfortunate. And in the same vein, I also see people keeping the dog confined on their property, but because somebody's not careful, opens the door, opens the gate without looking, the dog escapes, hurts another dog or another human, which is even worse, right? So just because you have certain structures in place, don't assume that it's necessarily going to protect your dog. Make sure to just be aware of where the dog is, where other people are, and just don't open the door mindlessly, and always look around and double check everything. So that's the part one, prevention of the dog aggression. Step number 2 is don't wait too long with hiring a lawyer if you know that the case has been picked up by the law enforcement and referred to the animal control. Because usually I see some very difficult outcomes or the cases that are really hard to fight when people come to us after the first hearing has already taken place. And the first hearing is an administrative hearing. It's usually done with the animal control. It's very informal, so people don't take it very seriously. They don't prepare their witnesses. They don't necessarily prepare all of the evidence that can support the dog's innocence. They don't think through all the potential options just in case the officials are not willing to go their way of how they can negotiate, still protecting and saving the dog. So there's a lot of work that can go into the preparation for that informal hearing, which would ensure that this hearing is successful. And that would ensure the elimination of the need to go to court. Because what usually happens is if the dog acts dangerously or in a way that's perceived as dangerous, such as, and I'll talk about that in just a moment, what is considered dangerous at what point. If the dog is acting dangerously, then the presumption is going to be sort of against that dog. And the animal control will be looking to protect everybody else, all the other people in the community, all the other animals of the community. And there is a pretty high chance that unless the dog owner puts a good case to save the dog, that the final decision will be to euthanize. And then the next step that happens is either abide by this decision or go to court, which is pretty expensive, right? I mean, nobody wants this kind of expenses if they can avoid it. So yes, step number 2, get the lawyers, knowledgeable lawyers fairly early in the process to prepare for that administrative hearing, because that hearing is extremely important.
好，非常感谢安娜律师对我们的介绍。刚才安娜律师也谈到了说，这个狗很有可能会实施安乐死。我相信啊，任何一个狗主人都不希望自己的狗会被安乐死哈。接下来这个问题，我想请问安娜的是，哪些机构有权决定是否对狗实施安乐死呢？Anna, I would like to ask you, which authorities have the power to decide whether a dog should be euthanized?
So the main authority here is going to be animal control, local animal control, either local animal control of the municipality, of the city, really depends on how it is structured in specific jurisdiction. And then if someone is unhappy with the decision, either the owner is unhappy with the decision or the animal control is unhappy with the decision, each party can basically go to court and petition for the case to be heard in the local civil court.
好，感谢安娜的介绍啊。其实，在加州啊，有不同的司法辖区。想请问安娜的是，依据什么样的标准会将狗认定为危险动物呢？Anna, in different places across California, what criteria are used to classify a dog as a dangerous animal?
So I have to say that these criteria are different depending on the locality. It is, so there is a California law definition of dangerous dog and potentially dangerous dog, but also every county and every city can have their own definitions and their own protocols. So I think it's a word of caution for the dog owners. If you move even a few streets down and you're in a different municipality, it's worth checking if the laws are different. So let me go over a few of them just to show you how different they are. And I'm going to use a printout for it just not to get confused too much. So in California state law definition, there are two types of dangerousness, 2 degrees of dangerousness. One is called a potentially dangerous dog, and another one is called a vicious dog. And a potentially dangerous dog is a dog that is unprovoked on 2 separate occasions within 36 months period, 3 years, 2 separate occasions within 3 years, engages in behavior requiring defensive action by a person to prevent bodily injury of the owner's property. Right? So the important part here of the owner's property, on the owner's property, it might not fall under this definition. And another important distinction here is that engages in behavior requiring defensive action. So we're not necessarily talking about a bite that took place. We're not necessarily talking about an injury that took place, but the dog did something that requires you to maybe push back or grab a stick and try to scare the dog away. That would be enough to get the dog classified as potentially dangerous. And potentially dangerous triggers obligations to have the dog either muzzled, confined, possibly registered as a dangerous dog. So it calls for restrictions on the dog's life. And then grade 2 is vicious dog, which is much, much worse. It is a dog that unprovoked aggressively inflicts severe injury or kills a human, or a dog that's previously deemed potentially dangerous continues such behavior after the owner has been notified, right? And this second clause is actually very important because it tells you that even if no injury actually took place before or after, if there was a notice to the owner that a dog at some point scared people, caused them to do something in self-defense, if that behavior continues, the dog is going to be considered vicious. And vicious is where the question is, okay, is the dog going to be euthanized? So that's really important. And this is California state law. And then several jurisdictions have their own laws. For example, Los Angeles County is very similar to California state law. But the city of Los Angeles has different definitions. And in the city of Los Angeles, again, there are 2 categories. One category is dangerous animal. It's an animal that poses a potential threat to attack another animal or person. And if you can see, this definition is very broad. Poses a potential threat. How do you define that? That can be an argument, right? That it's not written in the law. So almost anyone can call the cops and say this animal poses a threat, and the case will be investigated. And also notice that here it includes another animal. And then also city of Los Angeles, the next grade of dangerousness is going to be vicious animal, an animal that attacked another animal or person. Again, nothing about the injuries. Again, an attack can be classified as an attempt of the dog to bite, maybe, or something we perceive as an attempt. But it's a very broad definition. And then another definition is San Bernardino County, which includes, I'm not going to read the whole thing here because it's pretty long and includes lots of really different scenarios that both include animals and people. And it includes the range from an actual injury to dangerous behavior on several occasions. So also it's fairly easy for a dog to get in trouble in San Bernardino County. So like I said, wherever you move, double check what your local codes say about how the dog could be classified as dangerous and act accordingly.
好，今天非常感谢安娜律师为我们大家深入的解读狗咬伤这个话题啊！再次感谢安娜律师，也感谢大家的收看，我们下期再见。Thank you, Anna, and thanks to everyone for watching. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone.